she has done work in forgiveness for actually a while now. I'll let her introduce herself a little bit more, but she and I met each other in Belfast in 2010. When we were just working on our master's degrees, actually, and have stayed in touch
Hey
for a while.
David,
She went
welcome
on to do a
in.
PhD
Hello.
at
Welcome.
University College London, if I'm not mistaken, in the science of forgiveness. Much more, so she has a much better background, I guess, than I do on this. But we will all kind of chip in and go there. And we also have
Excuse me.
Bern, whose last name I can never pronounce. Dierfacher. Is that close?
Yes, that was good.
Nice. Score 10 points for the American pronunciation. And who's actually, I met Burns. We met through the Center for Mind and Culture, I guess 2 or 3 years ago. And he does all sorts of awesome things in the tech and ethics space. But Kitty, I'll let you kind of introduce yourself a bit more in what you do with Wolf Institute, and et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you, Justin. My gosh, this is my first time on Topia, and my God, my mind is blown. It's taken me quite a while to get used to because I'm such an old-fangled. I've just managed to get my head around Zoom, so this is like a mind-blowing experience. As Justin said, I have known him for nearly 10 years, which is terrifying. We were both very young, enthusiastic, and green when we first met, and now we're old and haggard. As he said, I am a social psychologist. I did my PhD with Ryan McKay at close Holloway University, which is part of the University of London. And I looked at moral responsibility in cognition, so not specifically about forgiveness, but of course anything pertaining to morality and religion, because always sneaks in somehow. So my first interest actually was in confession. Why things, on the face of it, such a strange practice. Why people would voluntarily admit to something, moral wrongdoing, knowing that they're going to incur punishment. But for various reasons, that kind of progressed, and I ended up looking more broadly at moral behaviour, not just confession. And I now work at a interfaith institute in Cambridge, where I was hired to do a project very different to what I'm doing now, on looking at ways to develop indicators to assess the effectiveness of interventions. And a funding opportunity came up, and I fell back on an interest that, as Justin said, I had for ages, which is forgiveness. And I always wanted to work with Justin, and was so excited about the really cool modelling stuff that him and Ron are doing. And it felt like this would be a perfect opportunity to sort of combine our interests. And we got the funding, and now we are doing a very cool project looking at how cross-cultural and inter and inter-religious variation in forgiveness can affect what we call future building, post-conflict identities, particularly in Northern Ireland, the Balkans, and South Sudan. So the plan is to start early next month. We have our first research meeting scheduled for the 8th of February. So I am very, very excited. And I can't wait to see what kind of cool things we find as we delve deeper and deeper into the murky world of forgiveness in post-conflict societies.
Yeah, no, that definitely is a good summation of what we're up to. It's going to be an interesting project because, to my knowledge, no one has used this kind of simulation approach to try and better understand like peace and peace policies. People have used modeling and simulation to try and understand conflict. Conflict modeling is actually a really big field relative to other forms of modeling. But conflict is one of the things that's becoming one of the more hot topics, or like sexy things to model these days. Part of it is because there's an obvious like social benefit to modeling conflict, right? It's a big issue for anyone involved in it. The other thing, though, is that because it's a big issue, there's also big money involved in it, and there's a lot of government grants to do conflict modeling. Oddly enough, there aren't so many institutions or groups that are interested in modeling peace, or even more importantly, how you can sustain peace after there's a conflict. In some of the work that Laurent and I did earlier on, we kind of came upon a sort of almost like a chance finding
by
in
accident.
our work. Yeah, we were using one of our early multi-agent AI systems to study conflict, and we were studying it in the context of Northern Ireland and India, Pakistan. And what we kind of found is that most of the simulation runs in this psychologically realistic social simulation ended up with generally a very peaceful kind of output. We were able to simulate with very high accuracy conflicts. So we were able to get within 2% of all conflict records in Northern Ireland, for example, and that conflict lasted for 40 years. So in a simulation of a 40-year conflict, we were able to get within 2%, which we were really happy about. And it also wasn't just like a mathematical thing. It also had like the historical curves to it as well that were interesting for us. But the fact that we kept coming back to this finding of like most of our data shows that under a wide variety of conditions, things are generally peaceful, suggested that there's something behind conflict and peace as like really being two sides of the same coin that open up the ability for us to kind of study this in an interesting way. And then of course when Kitty came to us and said, hey, there's this whole thing, what is forgiveness even part of your model? And it was kind of like, not really, not in this way. And is it policy relevant? And I was thinking, yeah, in 2019, I guess, I wrote a piece for a magazine in the United Kingdom, looking at the results of our AI model and saying, the situation with Brexit is likely to be one in which that hard border is going to increase violence in Northern Ireland, particularly in certain areas like near the boundary and in Belfast, where there's kind of like cultural boundaries throughout the city. And sort of sadly, it seems that like there was an increase in activity from paramilitaries in Northern Ireland surrounding the Brexit situation. So, this offers a really interesting like real world application of our AI to try and do something where we can better understand what's the framework for this, but also apply our technology into new data pipelines, which is also fun. So hooking up the Culture Pulse system to Google News, so that as news is happening, we can look at this historically, because Google has done a great job collaborating with an academic group that's basically archived the news. The digital version of the news has been archived at Google, and is open for researchers to get a hold of. And so we'll be working with one of that in order to get like a Google News pipeline set up into the Culture Pulse system. Which
decided to keep it going for people's boxes.
If I could jump in too, Justin, it just occurred to me, I don't know if you've told Kitty about, but I don't think I've ever had a chat with her about the other models we did that are a little bit closer to forgiveness than they are to conflict, the ones on pro-sociality. So pro-sociality are behaviors that don't take care of yourself, but that are for others in some way, altruistic behaviors. And so we've done a couple of different models, just published last year, I think. Yeah. On especially related to religion, and some of the findings there had to do with the extent to which individuals are more trusting of people within their groups and outside their groups, and their tolerance for in-group and out-group members. We got the data there from the World Values Survey, and so basically we did statistical analysis of several different waves of the WVS, and then we created an agent-based model that could grow, so an artificial society that would move from, I forget what year it was, 1990 something to 2010 or 2018 or something. And so the artificial society, actually the agents became more or less religious, more or less pro-social, more or less tolerant, volunteered more or less in the way that happened in the real world. So we're not yet to kind of robust forgiveness, but we have some other code and some other experience with experts that are moving in that direction.
I have a new schedule.
This is making me think about a conversation that's been kind of going on, and it's kind of a marketing conversation, kind of a philosophical one. kind of a lot of things, but you know, harm is often this very tangible, measurable, visible thing.
Get the
And when you look at peace, or at least the opposite of harm, you know, you could split it of like the divine masculine, the divine feminine, you know, ego versus eco, kind of all the same frame, is that you have these very visible things and then these kind of largely invisible or quiet things. And forgiveness seems like it's the other side of that harm, where it is a proactive, actionable thing that you can instruct someone to do. It's very visible, but at the same time, it seems to be this counterpart. Is that a fair kind of a fair label? And then the secondary part of it is like, can we turn that into a game? I mean, Justin, you were talking about news alerts, and I was thinking like, you know, man, if we had like a forgiveness alert of like, hey, like this is happening in the news, like, you know, you should go and forgive someone who you feel harmed you for this specific thing.
That's a wild idea. I hadn't even thought about that, even though like it is kind of like a logical extension of this. Kitty, do you even think that would work, given like what you've read about how forgiveness kind of works psychologically? Would that even be a thing that would work, or was that a thing where people are, it's just it wouldn't work that way?
I don't know. I love the idea, though. Like you said, it's totally wild. I love it. So a couple of things. First of all, I don't know. I feel like at the moment in this sort of online culture where people are sort of constantly hauled across the coals for sort of things they said that people find offensive, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, there is this real lack of forgiveness in this sort of model we have at the moment in society, this sort of cancel culture. And I don't know, I think to introduce sort of something that would involve more forgiveness might be quite a nice sort of counter to this rather hostile public debate that we have at the moment. I think it's quite a nice idea. Forgiveness, yeah. I love the idea of forgiveness being related to harm. I think the two, like you're saying, go sort of hand in hand. What I've always really found interesting about forgiveness, actually, is just like the power dynamics. If there's been a transgression committed, it's almost like if you forgive, you suddenly become somehow morally elevated. Like you suddenly become the more powerful in that dyad between you and the transgressor. And I find that interesting power play really fascinating. So there's this underlying dynamics going on. Whether that could translate into some kind of game would be fascinating. I don't know what kind of game you had in mind. Was it like computer game, like role-playing game, like?
Yeah, more like Fitbit, I guess, where you get like forgiveness points. The thing is, so I recently
Reddit have karma.
Yeah, Reddit has karma.
Karma.
I recently
sort of a thing.
Begrudgingly got the I guess fitness tracker, the Aura Ring, was the one I didn't want to screen on my wrist. Different tangent. I love it. It's great, but I sit a lot, and just getting a notification every day attached to a thing that's physically on my body of like, you should be moving right now, right? Like all the notifications that I got previously that were not attached to data, I'm like, okay, like you're sending me a notification every 2 hours, like fuck off. But now that it's based in data, I'm like, all right, I'll go for a walk. And so I think like that kind of delicate blend of saying just, it's a prompt, but a prompt based in data, and having some contextual source of like, hey, this is happening in the news right now. And so anyone, you are likely to be, I don't know, I guess I don't know of a way to make this point without making it very personal, but when certain things happen in the news that are related to money, it makes all of the money harm that has been, I would say inflicted upon me, but really just like, manifested in my own mind based on external events, that comes to surface. All of the unprocessed stuff kind of comes to surface because you see something in the news and you relate it to yourself. So if there was a notification that popped up that said, hey, like you should forgive, and here are some pathways to do so, that was kind of where the idea came from.
Yeah.
Brian, I think it's a great idea, and I can imagine that it would actually work. But just to throw in an issue related to forgiveness that often comes up in psychological and therapeutic literature, that are like two different dynamics. First, sometimes people equate forgiveness with excusing, so like letting someone get off the hook, and that can trigger psychological resistance. But another is like say that I got the thing on my finger, or something happened in the world that was conflict and it encouraged me to forgive, and then I went to an old boss, or said an old boss, for example, right, or somebody who had offended me, and I say, I forgive you for being a jerk, like that level of forgiveness doesn't really promote
forgive
anything
you all
healthy.
for being
So it
jerks
might
to
need
me.
to be in the more, or at least in some languages, the word forgiveness is tied to etymologically the word grace, or well-being, and even gratitude, in Greek, for example. So if
Pikachu seems to like, I forgive you, Pikachu.
if the prompt was to show grace to someone who's not in your in-group, or to encourage, or even feel meta towards someone, or do something concrete like that, I think that might be better than forgive someone who's hurt you, or have to think that through, and specifically in relationship to the reaction you just expressed, right?
One of my favorite wisdoms that was shared with
Thank
us
you,
by
Pikachu.
the executive coach to the co-CEO of Whole Foods, among other people. He's just a great human. He said, what goes up and must come down is gravity. What goes down and must come up is grace.
That's interesting.
Bringing the philosophy
that.
into the science.
I like that. One of the things that also kind of like, one of your comments, Brian, mentioned that like it spurred my thinking.
Hello.
Right, is that
Welcome in.
it's not just about news
Nice to
streams,
meet
right?
you.
But it's
My
about
name is
how we
Elise.
react to news streams. So, a lot of times in certain circumstances, there are physiological markers of psychological states, right? Like anxiety is the easiest, right? Because we can see an increase in heart rate. But Kitty, is there any work that you know of about physiological signals? Like if you are, like, does forgiveness
that's interesting.
like lower heart rate or anything like that in the near term?
Now that is really interesting. I
It's like-
don't know of anything that I've never actually
Yeah,
read. Like,
I've never heard of it
somebody sort
either.
fitted. But that would
We're
be
doing like a
really
live
quite a cool thing to do,
podcast,
to
Mama
see
Dean.
whether in some
A
sort
live
of
conversation.
reconciliation intervention or something,
Yeah,
the
because I mean,
process of
Hey
forgiving
Lucy, welcome
a
in.
person who's
Nice to
harmed you
meet
and
you.
someone
My
who
name is
lowers heart
Elise.
rate.
put like a Fitbit and an
I predict
EEG on
they
someone and
probably
have them go
would,
to
I would
confession.
imagine. Yeah.
Seems easy enough. Somebody call Templeton. Let's get
Yeah, no,
somebody
that would be
behind this.
amazing.
Like,
Yeah.
they call
Yeah.
Johnny Templeton. Like, it's just one of those interesting
That's
questions,
such a
right?
good idea.
Because, like, Brian's ring, my watch, like, they real time track our heart rates all day while we're wearing them, right? They track our sleep patterns and things like that. So it's possible that we might be able to utilize something and say, look, well, we know that you have these kind of beliefs, and we know that these kind of beliefs are happening. And, there's now an increase. We've noticed that you're not sleeping as well. We've noticed that you have heightened levels of heart rates throughout the day. We've noticed that you're not getting as
Hey,
much
Lucy,
exercise as
open
you
those
used to, right?
boxes.
Some of these
You're
things
welcome
that
to my free
are,
coins. Take them.
markers of negative psychological states, that could be interesting.
There's a whole group of people, Mama Dean.
It could be interesting signals to utilize
They're all,
and say, give
AI
someone an alert
experts.
to say, hey, you should think about your mental health. Do you
Sociologists,
need to forgive someone? Do you
smart
need to
people.
be forgiven for something? Which is the other part of it. Do you need to make amends? Do you need to be on the other side of that conversation? As something that could potentially be there, right? Because forgiveness is always, it's interesting because you think of forgiveness, but at the same time, right, there is that the opposite side of it, right? Being grace is like being forgiven. Because it is ultimately, I mean, you can say that, forgiveness is forgiving yourself, but particularly in the context of conflict, right? In religious conflict and ethnic conflict, a lot of the peace building, it's not just individuals forgiving themselves for what they've done. if they've done something negative in the context of a conflict, because a lot of them can justify that of like, I did what I had to do. But at the same time, there's obviously the I forgive the other side because I understand that they thought that they had to do what they felt they had to do. But now we're no longer in that context. And so I can forgive them. We can move beyond that. So maybe it's a matter of trust, actually. Like, I trust that this guy's not going to go back into like war mode on me because we're beyond that now. So maybe there's a link there between forgiveness and trust, or forgiveness and perspective taking, or empathy.
Oh yeah, I can guarantee you that someone somewhere will have done a study on empathy and perspective taking and trust and forgiveness. Guarantee you. Just Google it on Google Scholar now. But actually, Laurent said something really interesting, which started me thinking.
There's a lot of people, so it's
our
really hard to
has a alert that tells
get
you
in to say something.
different
I want to say
sort of
something.
backfires, and is really sort of non-utilitarian in the sense that you go up to a boss and go, hey, it's okay, I forgive you for being a total arsehole. So, what do you do then in that situation if the boss turns around and goes, well, I don't think I was an arsehole? There's nothing for you to...
Well, I think it's from experience, when you're apologizing to someone and your apology is tied to a label, for them basically to accept the apology, they basically have to consent to the label. So that would be an errant
Cassie,
apology
welcome
that still
in.
contains some baggage.
Calling
Would be
you
my
here,
2
right?
cents on that. I don't know what the scientific response is, so feel free to add science to that.
Well, I think at the end of the day, it's very easy to weaponize forgiveness and like mask passive aggression as forgiveness. It's like,
Exactly.
I get to call you an asshole because I'm forgiving you for it. And it's like, that's not how this works.
No. This is why, like, there's no simple one way of treating the word forgiveness. It'll be operationalized or defined in very different ways, and even within a particular discipline like psychology or within therapy, people will use the term differently. Like for me, the broadest sense of forgiveness is wishing the well-being of the other. So someone may have done something that feels wrong to you. So you don't necessarily excuse them. I mean, you might even want them to go to jail, or you might not want to know them anymore because they continue to be violent or something. And it doesn't mean you pretend like they weren't bad. I don't think. But if you can achieve a level of wishing them well, I think that's at least at the core. That's how I like to operationalize it. So if someone has offended me, done something wrong, or done something hurtful, I may not excuse them. I may not even like them or want to be with them. But if I can wish them well-being, then I think that's at least the main start to have in one's intention toward that person. I wish them well.
Yeah. So at Kitty's inspiration / request, I did Google Scholar real quick, empathy, forgiveness, and perspective taking. And in a way, some of the things that I found just by reading abstracts really quick are interesting. And one study I actually realized I have already and I've read is definitely
Retro.
interesting.
I'm doing good. How are you?
One is that yes, empathy and perspective taking do tend to aid
Don't have enemies.
forgiveness generally.
That's the
There's also
issue.
been at least one study done on what they call the dark triad: Machiavellianism, narcissism, and psychopathy, and found that empathetic concern and perspective taking were able to basically mediate, statistically partially mediate at least, the relationship between Machiavellianism and forgiveness, and between psychopathy and forgiveness. But when you try and put it all in there, it doesn't really.
We're talking
The
about
biggest
the
thing that works is
science of
empathetic concern.
forgiveness.
So it's empathetic concern more than perspective taking, it seems.
You literally
But
yeah, right, Pikachu.
this other study that was done in 2007
Right? We're too old for enemies.
found something that's very
We don't got time for
interesting.
that.
They basically found that perspective taking mediated the relationship between emotional management and forgiveness. Now, that's pretty interesting to me, and one of the reasons that stands out is because when it comes to things like emotional regulation, that's an executive function cognitively, right? Like these are like the things that happen in the front of your little brain bucket, and that are typically they're very unique to higher order primates.
I want to say something.
And things like emotional regulation is like, being in a context where you want to get mad, but it's inappropriate to show your anger, right? So you don't show your anger. You put on your smile and you just grin and bear it and you move through it. That is something that's very difficult to do cognitively. Most animals don't do that except for pretty much humans, and for example. So the ability to do that, on the one hand, it's interesting because, as that's promoted, that promotes the ability to forgive. However, what's also interesting is that it's fairly well documented that ritual participation also increases that, but it also increases and solidifies group boundaries. Right? So this is the kind of complexity that I think, really is one of the reasons we need complex systems and AI models in order to address this problem, right? You have this one thing, ritual, right, which is common to religions, ethnicities, cultures all over the world. And as you participate in ritual, it increases the cognitive function that you need to forgive, the specific mechanisms, right, that are being linked to forgiveness, while also increasing your in-group tendencies to create a boundary between yourself and your in-group and others, the people that you would potentially conflict with. So religious ritual in itself, right, is both a common cause and a common factor in the solution to things like forgiveness. So, yeah,
I was just going to say that's also related, Justin, to the models on prosociality or altruism that I was mentioning earlier, because often people will engage in what's called parochial altruism or parochial prosociality. So they may forgive people in their in-group or have empathy toward in-group members, especially those they're ritually engaged with. But precisely that behavior will activate out-group antagonism, in part because when you have a group that's ritually engaged regularly,
this is
that
in the
in
metaverse,
itself tends
DJ
to
Retro.
mean that you're interacting with and networking with other people who are more parochial. And that amplifies your own parochialness. So this is what that model showed and was validated through the World Value Survey data. So Kitty, you may have heard Brian at the very beginning say this thing we do every week. We call it practicing safe sex, SECTS. Yeah. So and we always come to this point. This is sort of the driving question for us in so many of our projects. How can you promote, because humans need sex, they want to live in groups pleasantly with well-being, so how can you promote that but in a way that doesn't also activate out-group antagonism, conflict, lack of trust, lack of tolerance? So one of the reasons Justin and I get so excited about multi-agent artificial intelligence is because they can tease out within a complex system all these different variables and the conditions under which they're more or less likely to expand in different directions and in different ways.
I have an idea. Can y'all hear me?
It's one of those things where when you come up to a moment or a problem
I have to do this
where socially or psychologically, right, the solution is also part of the cause, you get into a situation where you realize that there's no chance for traditional statistical experimentation to answer this question.
You can't even hear my audio.
Because you can't
start myself and come back. Sometimes my audio goes out on this website. I'll be right back. Thank you for your patience, y'all. I have to restart this website because they can't hear me, and I have a good idea. I have an idea I want to share about how we can do this work and how AI can help. But who am I? I'm just a girl. Hey Chino, welcome in. Nice to meet you, Chino. It's a pleasure to meet you. Oh my gosh, this website's taking forever to load. It's taking forever to load. How's everybody doing today? Since we're taking a little break from the action here. Wow, yeah, it's really not loading. I'm doing good, Gino. Thanks for stopping by. My name is Elise. Brew it. I'm brewing hot water. Yeah, just straight hot water today. Just helping soothe my throat. You're leaving work soon? Oh, that's good. Your day done? That was a fast one. Enter world, okay. Yeah, this website like has so much demand on my system. It's got so much demand on my system. This metaverse world. And I'm running streams too. I'm running OBS, so I think that's another reason why it does that. All right, let's see. Yeah, just hot water. I had coffee earlier. Gino, what do you need? Yeah, what do you need? Let us know. Yeah, I just drank coffee, so I'm still feeling the buzz from that. I'll drink tea a little bit later. You can hear the fire. You don't drink coffee? I love coffee. One good cup in the morning, one good strong cup in the morning. Yeah, it's taking a while to load up everybody's.
That you haven't tried that might help you.
So we have more than 10 people here, so let me really quickly make Justin and LaRon and Kitty presenters. So keep talking.
Oh, we lost Kitty. We lost Kitty too.
Very nice. So yeah, so I think that's one of the interesting things here, right? Is there's a lot of people who have studied conflict to the point of saying like, yeah, I'll write this publicly.
Every culture is different.
But there's
you have to go all
very
the way down
few
to the level
people.
of every
People
individual,
talking over each other
and
now.
even different under different contexts. So it might.
There we go.
There's also several people from a policy perspective who have said, hey, I'm willing to like do this thing.
Yeah,
And
it's
like
like
enact
DJ.
a policy and
There's
make a
been so many
public statement
people.
about how society should work in a conflict zone. But typically, the person who studied it a lot and wrote the paper is not willing to make the policy suggestion or enact the policy. And oftentimes, the person who's enacting the policy hasn't actually studied it in any sort of scientific sense. So bridging those two worlds, I think, between the scientist and the expert and the policymaker and the stakeholder is something that's really, really difficult, but is really, really important right now, right? They keep saying, follow the science has been the whole thing of 2021, 2022. And we haven't always been very good at it. And I think in a conflict area, we have to make sure that we're really good at it, and we have to be, really clear about it. But also we have to be able to speak about what we're doing in a way that, one, politicians understand, and two, politicians care about. And figuring out how to do that, and potentially figuring out how to constrain our AI models in such a way that we're only looking at, political possibilities, right? Because there might be a solution to a conflict or a solution to promote forgiveness in Northern Ireland that's just unacceptable politically. It's just not a non-starter. It's not going to happen. So the question becomes, to what extent do we even investigate these political non-starters?
Yeah, this is one of the reasons why I'm so excited to work with Kitty and the project that she's put together, because as I understand it, there'll be I forget the term used, middle-level managers, or people who are actually on the ground, who are not only policy makers, but actually implementing the policies and struggling with how to get reconciliation to occur.
Yeah, exactly. So we're really lucky actually because the funders of our project come from a place of sort of social action. So we're really lucky in the sense that that's what they want. They want a research project that's going to be able to design and deliver practical outputs for people on the ground. So the term they keep sort of using is mid-level emerging religious leaders. So how can we help
Hey Chino,
these
what
sort
did
of
you need from us?
important key figures in post-conflict societies who perhaps have a role that transcends various different groups? So they're like what you might call linking figures who can sort of link between policymakers and on the ground. How can we equip those people with the tools and the knowledge to be able to foster positive post-conflict identity or encourage talking about forgiveness? And that's why I think I like it so much, because Justin, you said, there's this mismatch between academics and policymakers, and it's so true. I've been to so many of these things where like academics just give this talk and the room is full of policymakers and it just falls flat. And the academics kind of get like, well, I'm giving you my best material here. How can you possibly think? And it's just like,
these are my greatest hits, man.
I know. It's like, look at this. Look at the p-value, and the policymakers are like, I don't give a shit, because it comes from a very different place of,
I'm doing good,
intention.
Enjoying my day.
There's
also comes from a different place of risk.
It's
easy to say nonsense when you're tenured.
Yeah, but think about it.
Tired of the ivory tower has proven that over the last few years.
I mean, think about it. If you grew up in a conflict zone, how much trust would you have in somebody who swans in from Oxford and suddenly starts telling you should be doing this because you ran a study in the lab? You just think, I don't care what you have to say.
Indeed.
You're ridiculous.
Yeah. People at Oxford don't get shot at very often. Maybe.
No, they don't.
Do a little people hunting in Oxford. It might help balance some things. It might get some perspective. Anyway.
I mean, Bill Gates released a bunch of mosquitoes on a crowd, so
into a TED Talk, got people to listen.
Go around Oxford shooting people with paintballs.
Dude, a couple of drive-by paintballings, I think, would start to get people.
You think?
I could have.
Maybe that's the first thing of the project.
If we can get a grant for this, I'm more than happy to provide my marksmanship for this
Brian,
research
I will
project.
help finance this personally. Could you
I'm
imagine?
more worried about the legal
ruin
element.
4 or 5 tweed jackets in Oxford with some paintball, and dude, you'll see some changes real quick. Don't mess with the tweed.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking
not gonna
tweed,
wash
but
out
tweed
tweed
definitely
either.
is a value add there.
It's never gonna wash out a tweed.
Hey
Like,
y'all, I
you can't-
have an
dude,
idea.
You cannot stain your tweed. That's a rule. That's a rule.
Am I
That's
still
why
not
they
being
like to
heard?
drink clear liquors in Oxford.
This is
It's
what
all
you
about the
learned with your
pens.
doctorate.
This is exactly what I
Is my
learned with
audio
my
not
doctorate.
working for
How do you
y'all?
get a stain out of tweed?
Well, we're coming up on the hours. We got about 10 minutes left.
can't even hear me.
Would love to hear. I mean, any more? It seems like we definitely need to put a proposal together about what I guess we'll codename the Forgiveness Project or Forgiveness Points or something like that. But yeah, that's super exciting. While I let someone else talk, I'll see if that domain's available.
Yeah, go for it. So I think that these are
Alright, let me try to
interesting. I mean, I
change
think
my
like
mic
we've already had a couple of
and see.
really fun kind of blue sky ideas, like the idea of an app that could help with forgiveness. Really kind of makes me think like a little bit more about how there's two sides to it.
Hey Jeff,
and
welcome in. Nice to meet
what would the
you.
repercussions be? But also I think this disconnect I think between people and understanding the risks in a conflict zone. And understanding how little time a lot of people who say they're experts spend in conflict zones is really problematic. Laurent and I have one colleague who recently passed away, Jesse Morton, who spent a lot of his life. He was a sort of a former radical extremist who was recruiting for ISIS and Al Qaeda, and he left the organization and spent the next few years of his life fighting extremism. And one of the things that he was very vocal about was that there was a lot of wasted energy and wasted money going to people who didn't know the first thing about conflict, who had a good grant proposal, who wrote a grant, and then they'd basically
Sheesh,
blow
thanks for
smoke
the
up their ass
savage.
for
Hi,
like the next
Peach.
2 to
Welcome in.
3
Nice to meet you.
years,
My name is
dealing
Elise.
with problems that were only relevant a year before they even started their
Welcome to the
project.
hand
At
raise,
which
Sheesh.
point, the issues of the conflict, the people committing the conflict, and the trajectory of the conflict had all changed. And so, the grant ends after 2 or 3 years, and they said very little of relevance to a problem of at that point 4 years ago, and absolutely nothing of relevance to the time at that time when they were saying it. And a lot of it was because there were people that were writing these grants because
See you
that was
later,
their
Aldo
career,
Rose. Have a great
was
rest of
to
your day.
write grants for universities, because the university says, look, you're tenured, you have a lifetime position, you need to write these grants, and they have no repercussions if they're wrong. Their job is secure. They won't be fired if
Thanks
they're
for the
wrong.
spill the tea,
They still
Sheesh.
get paid either way. They still, get touted around by the provosts of their universities because they got the big paper and they got the big talk and all of this stuff. But meanwhile, they've done absolutely nothing to help the communities or to address the issues of conflict and extremism and radicalization and violence between communities. That's a very real issue for people in their daily
Hello,
lives.
Isla
And then there's a
Picardi
lot of people
woman.
who are on the ground in these conflict zones, who know a lot more than anyone with a PhD in political science, who are just not being listened to at all. And I think that that's one of the other things that's there, is that it's not just about engaging politicians, but also about engaging stakeholders and understanding that like everyone who lives in these communities, like the border communities, along the river, for example, near the bridge zones in Belfast, for example, the people who live along the
He's
boundary
in
lines
Europe. It is
in
later in the
Derry,
day there.
and Londonderry in Northern Ireland, like those are people who have more expertise in conflict than almost any PhD, and they're just as much stakeholders as the politicians who are going to be engaged, and the people who are going to have the edited volumes, and the people on the news who might ask the interviewee questions. But a lot of times the people just kind of forget, because those guys are just number points that no one's taking into account.
Yeah, we're really lucky to have, I don't know if I've told you guys, we have a girl on board who's sort of joining our research team. She's Serbian, but her father is Bosnian, and he's Muslim, and her mother is Orthodox. But she's she's in her 40s now, but she grew up during the conflict in the Balkans. She remembers it,
The DC,
and is now
right?
sort of really her entire life's
How many
goal
more
is to bring
academics do we
communities together.
need?
Because
It's
she is somebody
true.
who lives through, she remembers what it's
We
like
need more
to have
stakeholders.
a
It's
community under
true.
siege. She knows what bullets
People.
sound like. So she'll be involved with us, which I think is great, because otherwise it runs the risk of just being a lot of academics just sitting around going, yes. But to have Maya there, who she's fantastic, and she's so empathetic, and she has this really interesting perspective, because she's so proud of the fact that she's like from what she calls a mixed marriage. So she's got two sides. She speaks, multiple languages, and she's great. And she's also deeply interested in the notion of forgiveness. And for her, she said to me, the only way forward in the Balkans is forgiveness. That's why it is so important. So I'm really excited that we have somebody like Maya on our side.
I think it's a different Maya than the Maya who's on this in Topia with us right now. I think this Maya is our Maya from Culture Pulse. I think that's who that is. I think so. There's many Mayas, but there's only one Maya at Culture Pulse. But I think that these are like all things that a lot of people like. I'm one of the things that I think that's unique about what we're trying to do on this project is that we've kept in mind the reality of these situations. And I think part of it is just because we have such a weird group of people on this project. I mean, Kitty, you have a PhD in psychology. My background is in AI and anthropology. Laurent has backgrounds in both psychology or PhDs in both psychology and theology. The double PhD.
You have 2 PhDs, Laurent?
Yes.
You nerd.
It's a running joke here. It's a running joke. The doctor's Schultz.
You know what I realized just today? I got my first PhD 30 years ago.
Wow. How old were you when you got your first PhD?
26.
And when you got your second?
31, something like that. 32.
So I split the difference there, I think. I got mine when I was about 30. I submitted it when I was 29. I got it, I think, technically. I received the paper when I was 30.
Yeah, I'm starting to feel like an old man.
Hey, can y'all hear my
That's true.
mic now?
Well, old
Yeah, I
man,
can hear
young
you now,
man,
Elise.
or otherwise.
yeah.
Thank you so much for coming
I guess
and sharing
Brian can't hear
the
me.
divine wisdom of your PhDs. I say that both seriously and sarcastically, because that we have some actually. Total sidebar. We got Chantal's dissertation in printed form, and the title is so long that there is an ellipsis on the spine. I have never before seen that.
Very nice.
Yeah, PhD
Hi, it's
stuff.
Steve. Welcome in. Nice to
Thank,
meet you.
thank you so much, Kitty. It was a pleasure to have you.
Really quick though,
Oh,
Elise,
thanks
what
for
were
having
you?
me on.
Elise was about to jump in and say something. I don't know if you could hear
Yeah,
her.
I don't know if everybody can hear me. I know Justin said he could.
I can, though.
Cool. I'll
Oh,
try.
I can't hear her.
Yeah, so it's
we don't have a
weird.
broadcast podium, so Justin, if you can just repeat it.
Yeah, okay,
I'll
maybe
repeat it.
Justin
Yeah,
can
yeah.
repeat it. So I just had a very fast idea of, like, as a stakeholder of like a social media user that does work directly in empathy building, I think a place where like these apps that can, you know, help with like everyday forgiveness could be in moderation tools in social media, where essentially
Interesting.
both people, whoever
The rest of us
reports,
can't hear what she said.
whoever reports it, and then whoever's being reported on would have to go into some type of talking circle to truly understand why they're being reported on, and you know, that could both eliminate or reduce cancel culture, right? Because people won't be motivated to report others. Yeah, so that's the idea.
So not to cut you off because other people can't hear you. So the idea that she's kind of putting forward, right, is that the idea behind these forgiveness apps can actually potentially help in social media and help address cancel culture. Because one of the things that it could do is prompt us to kind of force people into, what was it you said? Like discussion circles?
Talking circles, like
talking circles, yeah, like force us into talking circles so that we kind of come face to face with one another rather than hiding behind different usernames and anonymity. It kind of puts a face to it, and you know, no one wants. People are, you know, they can be assholes when they hide anonymously, but it's a little harder to do that when there's a face to a name. You know, we get those social cognition things, the juices start flowing, and we worry about reputation management. So that's a really interesting idea, actually. Yeah, these sorts of things could, I think, really help with that. You know, it brings it face to face. One of the things that Laurent and I have been discussing with Minds.com, right, they're like a free speech social network that we've been working with, was actually to force people, particularly like in the case of racists and racial extremists, more than religious extremists, in the case of white supremacists, one of the things that you can do is if you force them to play cooperative games with people they hate or they think they hate, it breaks them of their cognitive bias towards saying, oh, these people are untrustworthy. I hate these people because, you know, they'll steal from you, or they won't do anything to help me out, sort of a thing. But if you force them into cooperative games, like in an economic sense where they're actually paid out, and Minds is willing to put their own company's cryptocurrency behind this to actually pay out in cryptocurrency to people who play cooperative games with people that they hate, that it actually forces them to slowly break their cognitive biases, and they make money doing it. So it's this organization is considering at this point,
how do you like that?
literally paying people to stop hating and start de-radicalizing them by using a similar situation, using a de-radicalization like talking circle. But the idea is that we're going to make them play economic games with one another. And if there's nobody available who's willing to do it, we're going to create AI agents where they're going to think, like if they're a white supremacist, they're going to think that they're playing against, an African American or a Muslim or a Jew. It's really just going to be AI. But they're going to think they're playing this, and the cooperative game is going to manipulate them by basically cooperating with them under the guise of being a racial minority, so that white supremacist would slowly be broken of their cognitive bias as they play from time to time. And we're thinking that this might be a criteria where no one's going to be deplatformed. But if you want to start posting again after you throw a couple of swastikas out there, you have to go through this sort of like economic bias training, where it's not like bias training in the sense of like the bias training you hear of today that people are discussing. It's actually more of like an economic or psychological experiment that's been validated to work to get people to just break their preconceptions and have a different experience of the interactions with people that they claim to hate.
Be interesting to see what that does to the value of the coin.
It would be very interesting to see what this does to the value of the coin. I think it would increase the value of that particular cryptocurrency because that cryptocurrency is directly tied to the perception of that social network. And that social network's perception does have a negative perception because the media has tried to attack anything that's a free speech social network as being a right-wing extremist organization. And if it is, it's hard to say, oh, they're a right-wing extremist organization that's literally paying people to stop hating each other. And it's kind of like, well, those are at odds, and it's going to basically, they put their money where their mouth is, and I think it's going to increase the value of the token.
Well, it makes the story of the token really good because it's like this is basically what you get for like helping to build these bridges.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I think it's it's an interesting way of like explaining how a cryptocurrency like has real world effects and is like grounded in something that happens in the real world. Whereas presently a lot of crypto projects are all still super theoretical and not quite understandable. This is like really understandable. Yeah. We give people these coins when they build bridges with people that they hate.
Yeah, it's not only the biggest wealth transfer in history in the name of a really cute dog. There he is, little Bitcoin.
I've got to run, but thank
me
you.
too.
Cool. Awesome.
We'll be back
See you next
here
week.
Next week.
Thank you.
An hour ago next week. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, bye, bye.
See ya.
I forgive you all. I love you all.
Oh my god, you can literally like save her on leave. This is so weird.
Yeah, everybody's got to walk away. See ya. Oh, that's funny. Oh, man. Thanks for being here, y'all. Thanks for coming by. You thought it was boring? Well, that's cool. Yeah, I can see you. Yeah, right? Yeah, they can't hear me. Sometimes on this app, they can't hear me, especially when there's so many people. I think in that meeting, we had like 11 or 12 people there. But I'm grateful that Justin let me speak up at the end there and share my idea. My idea is like in moderation tools on social media, like when someone harasses and you want to report them, like we should have that right and that ability to do that. Thank you for the hearts, y'all. Appreciate it. We should be able to have that ability to hold someone else accountable for harming us through their hate speech or whatever it is that we're reporting them on, but then also to have accountability of what that we can't just go around reporting everybody. So yeah, someone in the Reddit chat who is at the DC says linking your ID with your social presence is not very good, and that's true. So like when I shared that idea, Justin had immediately thought that, oh, this is going to be like a face-to-face, like the real people are going to have to face each other and there'll be a real face there. I think it could still be an anonymous face, right? Like it doesn't have to have like an authentic real ID for there to be value in that interaction, for the person that reports to be held accountable of like, hey, why did you report? You know, you can't just go around canceling everybody. Like you need to be held accountable of why you're reporting, and that could be a traumatic experience for them. But at the same time, it could be a very like clearing experience for them, that rather than just like saying it's trauma and then putting it away, it could be a way for people that do have these like instances of pain or hurt. They could have validation and process the trauma that they go through, whenever they experience hate speech online. And then additionally, the person that gets reported, because like right now, a lot of moderation tools, when you get reported, like, you just get deplatformed. Like, they ban you, or they, like, cancel your account, or, you know, like, they just do that. Pikachu, thanks for the spill of tea. Versus, like, really letting it be a learning experience. Thank you for the spill of tea. Thank you for the spill of tea. You know, that could be a mutual learning experience for both parties. And that's how, you know, I call it a talking circle, because restorative justice, hey, Pikachu, congrats on 13K fan noise. Thanks for all the spill the teas. You know, and like indigenous knowledge, indigenous practices, people often, you know, that when there was a conflict between two different parties, instead of involving the state and, you know, the justice system to, like, you know, take one person to court or whatever, it would be a conversation between the person that was offended, the offender, and other stakeholders involved, which could be friends and family in the community, so that everybody could actually process the trauma together and understand the context of how it happened, so everybody can move forward in a state of trust. Yeah, like, they've been employing this in criminal justice system here in the United States over the past 20 or so years, and have realized an immense amount of success. So it's like, why can't we, you know, apply those same principles to social media moderation? And we can still do it as anonymous parties, right? Like, but you have to be involved in those conversations. Yeah, so that was the idea I had. And that's it. So thank you all for joining my stream today. Thanks for being here. I do truly appreciate you. Yeah, that was a little bit hectic. Usually the groups that meet together are much smaller for this practicing safe sex. Today we had a lot of people, and I think that's why I had technical difficulties with being heard in the live conversation. But everybody, my name is Elise. It's really great to meet you all. If this is your first time here, I am a tea streamer. I am a tech entrepreneur, a crypto entrepreneur, very much involved in building empathy, space holding, and utilizing various forms of innovative social media to do that. So that's why I'm doing the streaming now. I appreciate you being here. I do stream regularly. Give me a follow if you are interested in tea, if you are interested in civility, if you are interested in cryptocurrency and metaverse type things. Give me a follow. That's definitely the subject matter of my streams. And yeah, I'll see you all next time. Thank you so much for joining.